You're in tune to WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your dial. We're going to fade this down here. We're here with Charles Davis. And would you say hello?
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to WKCR and our Sun Ra extravaganza here. And, well, I think I'll just turn it over to Pat and Charles here. And there you go.
Yeah, I'll just sit in for you and Phil Schaap briefly here and kind of pass the baton over to my fellow constituent here, Charles Davis. Charlie, you and I go back a ways.
Some ways, yeah. Way back.
What do you think about, as you're sitting there looking back in a position that I was in a minute ago? I mean, what can you tell us in the thousands and millions of people out there in radio land listening that perhaps I didn't touch upon already? You said you were listening to some of the things coming up on your radio, and I guess you got a feel of some of the territory I covered. One of the things being that you and Julian Priester joined the band relatively around the same time, since you guys were peers in school and from the same neighborhood, right?
Well, basically from high school.
Mm-hmm.
We were kind of dubbed during that time as the Bebop Twins. And it's around 54.
Yeah.
Started happening, kind of meandered to a certain position. That was a discovery period for us as far as music was concerned. Let me say live music, because we were into records, but and high school was another phase. But just as far as the working persona, knowing, rubbing elbows with people, that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened around 54. It started to.
You wanna get into a discussion of your transition from alto to baritone and how that happened?
Well,
do you think that's relevant to?
Well, yes. Well, the relevancy of it is the saxophone.
Yeah.
In starting, I guess you remember Lion and Healy. So my mother took me down to Lion and Healy to buy an alto, and during that time I ended up with a lyric, because when the guy brought the King out with all these pearls and whatnot, I don't think she wanted to invest in a haphazard venture. May be today and gone tomorrow. So I ended up with a lyric.
On a beginner.
Yeah, well, beginner, and another beginner ended up with the same saxophone. Years later, I sold it to Von Freeman. So,
how about that?
So that started the alto plan, and the baritone came about from the physical observance, and you're one of the main ones in the picture. I used to see you at the Regal and various places playing. Also, Leo Parker was one of the main influences for falling in love with the baritone saxophone. So that's how that came about. And in Chicago, when you go out jamming, you play any horn in the jam session. So it's not really a question of being your particular instrument. It's just if you're having a good time, if it's alto, tenor, or whatever, bass, if the drums, for instance, a lot of people were surprised to find out that Wilbur Webb was such an exceptional drummer.
Right.
Although he played bass. So it happened like that. And, of course, in Chicago, it was a big musical town. So, you could only have fun.
Yeah, at that time, it was a very, very lush ground an environment to be in for a musician, because there were so many musicians who had a lot to say and they were around at that time and were playing, and there was always some place to go where guys were jamming and or working or something. You could come in and play, and it was just a wonderful place to be at the time to get your feet wet and learn your ropes. But this is about Sun Ra, why we're here now, and I'd like for you to draw on your memory of some of your first days as being a part of the band.
Well, some of the first...
And I'm going to leave you with that because I got to cut out.
Okay, so I'll elaborate on that for a minute or two. But the first part of that is dealing with the music of Sun Ra. And that started happening around 1954, as far as I'm concerned. And that led up to many happy moments playing with Sun Ra. Also, in Sun Ra's band, it was one of the few bands around at the time that had two baritone saxophones in it. Not that it was the very beginning, but around Chicago, that was one of the only few bands that featured two baritone saxophones. Incidentally, Pat and I made a record with Sun Ra, a song which we co-wrote called Two Tones. It was recorded on, what was the label? I've forgotten the label now. Tom Wilson, I think.
Yeah. So maybe Savoy or Transition.
Transition was the label, yeah. That's the label. Two Tones. And I had a wonderful experience playing with Sun Ra. I played with him periodically for... since 1954. Then about 56, I started traveling. Clarence Henry, Dinah Washington, on into New York, Kenny Dorham, and a host of others.
Uh-huh. And did you come back to Sun Ra, or was that pretty much it?
I played in and out. In 75, I did a tour with him, and occasionally I would go down to Philly and play with him in various places, in Boston and whatnot.
And are you still close with him now, or?
Well, we're fairly close.
Yeah.
Although I've been kind of traveling and working with other people, but we're still close.
Yeah.
So we're cosmically connected.
Sure. Once that way, I'm sure. Always. Are there any particular recordings that stand out for you that we can share with everyone so they have an idea of what's
like the one I said, Two Tones.
Unfortunately, that's one that we don't have.
You don't have, yeah.
We got a lot of them.
Yeah, you don't have that one. Oh, it's another one on Saturn. It's called The Kingdom of Not. You have that.
Look for it. Maybe it's under a different title.
Or it could be.
It's hard to tell what.
Yeah, they've been reissued, so I haven't been able to keep up with the changing of the titles.
Okay. Well, I guess, are there any particular areas that you would like to address with your relation to Sun Ra?
Yeah, well, my area, like I said, was in the beginning. This is in my beginning phase of learning about performing. Where that's you study in high school and whatnot, and you have a few little gigs on the side. But in the real world, this is when things start happening, and it means that the glamour and the glory goes along with the trials and tribulations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy to deal with a lot of things in life if you don't have a good foundation, and that's the crux of the matter.
So he helped to give you that.
Yeah, well, it's, with philosophy and ideals and idealisms.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll go to some music now, and maybe we'll come back and talk a little more. We'll try to find some cuts with you on there and listen to that. For now, we're going to go back to Infinity of the Universe from Art Forms of Dimensions Tomorrow, and then we're going to move on to some other things. So please stay tuned. You're listening to the Sun Ra Extravaganza here on WKCR FM New York, 89.9 on your dial.
We just heard Ankh from The Sound of Joy, and that, of course, was Sun Ra and the orchestra. with a tune that musically brought back some recollections for Charles Davis, who was one of two baritone players on that selection at a time when it wasn't the double tenor, but double baritone and multiple reed capabilities in the orchestra, a delightful time that really started in the 50s and reprised many, many different times in Charles Davis's career across the 50s and 60s and really has not stopped at all. The full personnel: Art Hoyle, Dave Young, trumpets, John Avant on trombone, Pat Patrick, baritone on this item, John Gilmore's tenor, Charles Davis making a double baritone in a very intriguing reed section, Victor Sproles on bass, and used to take those great photos when Bird came to town, among other things, Bill Cochran on drums, Jim Herndon also in the percussion, and Sun Ra primarily on electric piano, but you can call it keyboards, as it so frequently is. It is plural almost every time that we call your attention to Sun Ra, because there is so much in his worlds. And in this instance, it's back-to-back interviews with the presence of Charles Davis as a follow-up to our live interview with Pat Patrick. In fact, they had a nice little reunion and session, and indeed, we might have done better by our KCR standard had we just turned it over to Pat Patrick and let him take care of business with Charles Davis. But technical difficulties have been ironed out to a degree. Records have been found, and that's one of the great things. I'm a discographer, and the fact that I love Sun Ra must show how much he needs to be and deserves to be and will always be loved and respected, because this incredible array of issues, multiple issues, strange numbers, directions, mislabeling, but great music. If you try to write a book on the recorded sequence of Sun Ra's music, you can't do it. But if you want to listen to the music, a sequence can go on forever. And this is a little taste of forever. 116 hours, a Sun Ra festival here on WKCR FM New York. Get the word out, especially going into this holiday weekend, because we're going around the clock till Tuesday morning, the 21st at 8 a.m. That's around the clock, 24 hours a day. Or maybe it's just around the clock, and there aren't days, because where's the sun setting? Nowhere. The sun will never set on Sun Ra. So I'd like to join in with Charles Davis, who is, of course, talk with another Charles, Charlie Blass, and maybe we'll rehash some things, but this time we'll get it straight and on the airwaves and on the record. But the one thing I wanted to ask you right off the top, you played with the orchestra so many different times and in different contexts, and you've played jazz in so many different contexts. In almost each one, an axe is selected for you. There's the baritone in certain key moments, the tenor at certain key moments, and of course your capability of being very, very strong in your solo work and ensemble work on just about any member of the Reed family. When you worked with Sun Ra, was there a time where you were like a triple and quadruple threat as a Reed player, or was it primarily baritone work? Charles Davis.
Yes, it was primarily baritone then. But as I was explained to Pat before, in Chicago, it was just a question of influence. You know, I was always influenced with tenor. So, and you go to jam session, then you have to remember that it's a saxophone. You're just playing another key. And that's the primary issue as far as one saxophone opposed to another.
And sometimes it's just a different octave.
Yeah. Different octave.
Alto, baritone, double. But you have the tenor baritone double.
Well, I've also played soprano.
I know. Yeah.
Then my little alto gig was usually with Barry Harris and the 100 pieces, the singers, dancers, and band and whatnot.
When we were talking with Pat Patrick, which was just a little while ago, and you actually were here for some of it, we went into two different types of earliness in the musical worlds of Sun Ra. One was Pat Patrick being there when it was just a trio 37 years ago and building with it across the 50s and, of course, here into the 80s. The other kind of references to earliness that we refer to is the fact that Sun Ra was a prominent musical figure in Alabama, had a collegiate band that was a success in Chicago with his own band in 34. Of course, was with Fletcher Henderson, the 46, 47, and ran the Club de Lisa band in Chicago, too. But the one thing we only touched on, that perhaps this will be an opportunity for you to help us a lot, is the impact of a school sort of running a training ground for Sun Ra over the years because of its excellent musical program, which is DuSable High School. And among other educators, Walter Diet. Could you give us some insight into that and what members of the Sun Ra Orchestra that you know of are DuSable students?
Just about the entire band, save for a few, possibly that during my my tenure. As far as I know of, everybody was in. Maybe a few were not, but DuSable was Chicago musically. How could you not go to DuSable? You must know that from the history of from Nat Cole to Dinah Washington, Gene Ammons, Johnny Griffin, and so forth. So,
Well, I'm certainly glad we're not on the air in Chicago, so all the other high school grads and alumni, and there are some other jazz high schools, but DuSable had a prime position in training great musicians in your generation. Was Walter Diet the key figure? Was he the reason?
He was a prime figure before my generation. He was the prime figure with Nat Cole and Dinah Washington. This was started in the 30s, 39. Well, his legacy goes back to I think it was Wendell Phillips, and the school caught on fire, and then that's how DuSable came about, I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, it's all history.
Right. I think actually there was a musical figure from the Kansas City area who came up, Major N. Clark Smith.
Yeah.
That may be a little bit before all our time.
Yeah, well, you'd have to get to Milt Hinton to know about that,
Tell me something. Most music programs outside of a little dance band or a little negligible concert brass march music does not usually accent the saxophone.
March music?
Well, I'm not saying the march music doesn't employ the saxophone. I'm saying that if you were a music student at a high school, for instance, I'm from New York City, so I'll go to Jamaica High School. They have a music program, and you play sax on the side and study either clarinet, flute, or theory, or another instrument, because the sax, maybe they'll have, two Glenn Miller arrangements, which you can run down with a dance band, which will play String of Pearls and In the Mood, and then be out of the repertoire after two numbers, and you go back to the more traditional concert band.
Well, the songs you were speaking about was the same songs I learned In the Mood, and the trumpet players would get kicked out royally for the bridge of String of Pearls.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a tradition as far as.
But at DuSable and with Walter Diet, there was an allowance, if not an emphasis, on letting the students become saxophonists and encouragement and help. Am I correct?
I'm trying to understand what
were you, given? Did you play? Were you trained on saxophone or?
Oh well, let's backtrack. When you go to school, you go basically with what you want to play in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
As far as this is where I went to DuSable, I had a saxophone and I wanted to learn. So, at the time, what was popular? The alto solo on the Harlem Nocturne.
Earl Bostic.
No, Johnny Otis. And that was the at the time. And the amazing part was I found out by being in the classroom was that the guys could sound like the record because they were reading music, and they could hold the long note on the end, and that would tell stream you along by circular breathing, and just the live part of being there was fascinating, And from the first time I was in the band room, which was, once you got in the band room, you would cut other classes, but you'd always go to band. That was the amazing part of his karma, or his aura, as far as music is concerned. But getting back to what you were saying, and the way I came up, if you wanted to play an instrument, you basically played that instrument. It's the guys that wanted to be drummers, they took up drums. But if you played bass in the band, you had to play the tuba. If you played saxophone, you had to have lessons on the clarinet. If you played clarinet, you had to have saxophone lessons.
So there was such a great emphasis on the music program that you had the best of both worlds.
Yes.
You could play what you wanted to play, and you got rudimentary training in a traditional sense also.
Yeah.
And that was Walter Diet's contribution. Did Sun Ra and Walter Diet meet? Did they know of each other?
I would assume so. I don't know. I would assume so. I have no idea of them meeting at any time, but through sources, because when I first started observing Sun Ra, he had been working with Jimmy Ellis and Morris Ellis. So Morris Ellis and Jimmy Ellis have a connection to Walter Diet. So within the city, you know who's who at any given point. But Walter Diet, aside from having the school band, he had what you call the society bands that played at the bow tie affairs or the graduations and whatnot.
It's an interesting thing that Sun Ra, in a highly personalized way, is an extension of Walter Diet's effect on young musicians and helping in full training, although on a professional level with his musicians, but also in his presentation and his highly individual traditional being. I mean, he's carrying on getting people to be great musicians in a different sense, but in a sense of teaching as part of it. Did you feel that Sun Ra was part of your teaching and education as a musician?
True. I'd like to touch on one other point that
please do.
That Pat was speaking about. When he was saying about Club de Lisa, and also Sun Ra, during that period, he would arrange for Club de Lisa for the shows. He also had a choir. He also with the band we were in. And then he would also go around to hospitals, and do his therapy there. And then he would also play at, I know you're familiar with Calumet City.
Calumet, yes.
The strip joints. Yeah. And he would also play out at the strip joints. So he ran a full circle as far as music is concerned, during that time and staying busy,
We're talking live with Charles Davis here on the Sun Ra Festival, a live interview segment and a great deal of background information about the training of the musicians involved with Sun Ra in the early years coming across. One last aside on this, Sun Ra is from many places, but Birmingham was home for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And in so many of the important black communities, there are figures similar to Walter Diet. And there's one, Fess Watley from Birmingham, Alabama, who was the teacher of Sun Ra and also had the school band that also had society band for gigging on and encouraged the young Herman one to, take out a band and to emulate that. And of course, that was that collegian scene that also was Erskine Hawkins, but Sun Ra and bringing his first band to Chicago, which is really very surprisingly early. It's in December of 34 when he brings a band, Sun Ra does, from Birmingham to Chicago to play the Chicago Savoy. I think they opened December 15th of 34. You're listening to WKCR FM New York, a live interview with Charles Davis. I'm Phil Schaap. And my next question is, so the meetings with Sun Ra and you're being incorporated into the band, you said you had heard him play with other organizations. Did you gig with him outside the orchestra? Were you invited in? How did that happen?
Well, I don't really know. How it happened. It happened. Well, at this time, this was a period prior to just getting out of high school, the latter part of high school. That where at even a early age during that time, I was always out somewhere listening to somebody. So you hang around and you start dealing with the things of the time as far as learning how to play and being around people that can actually really, deliver. Then you learn how to, you learn what it's about, and then you go home and try. Mm-hmm. And that happens many cases in the aspect of learning how to play. Julian Priest and I were always out trying to jam and get it together. And then a guy named George Estrich helped us put a perspective together. It's one thing to learn, but it's another to have it put together where you can go out and actually, put the framework together and becomes a picture or a house or a story or whatever. So that was during that period.
Did it come together for you when you went into Sun Ra's orchestra? Was that the finishing?
Well, it hasn't finished yet.
Uh-huh. Tell me, what did you make of the music? Did it strike you as very different, about the same, parallel? What did you think?
It's music. I mean, the first time I heard Monk, I loved him. So, I mean, with Sun Ra, it was the same thing. You know, we have a description of music. Music is what's pleasing to the ear. As long as you like something, that's music to you.
The friends you grew up with in Chicago, particularly your musician friends, did they find the Sun Ra Orchestra pleasing to their ears, or did?
Yeah, well, you must remember that the band has evolved over a period of time. You know, now that we're into certain segments of music, which partially he's the reason why certain segments of music has turned over to what they're into now. You know, he's like the founding fathers of a lot of individuals, you know, musically. So we were in one phase, you know, which was what you have on record. You know, chronologically, you can go through a period of time, and then as other things change, you can see that musically.
Do you think Sun Ra's music has changed a great deal in the last 30 years? It's developed, but has it changed a great deal?
It's kind of hard to pinpoint change. You know, we play different songs, but we still put out a stamp of identification on it. It's like hearing Dizzy play, when I heard him play a little rock tune, or you hear Miles play, you know, but his identification, that the surroundings may change, but his identification is still the same.
When you made your early performances with Sun Ra, was there as much incorporation of Fletcher Henderson big band music and Duke Ellington big band music as there is today, or is that something that changed over the years?
Well, it was incorporated into Duke Ellington and Fletcher Henderson, but maybe not so much then as it is now.
Did Sun Ra, did you hear him do to anybody else, or for you as an individual, any kind of advice, description, instructions on how to solo on his music, either in general or on a particular work?
Yes.
Could you talk about that?
Well, I can give you a humorous aspect on it. I remember once he said to somebody, he said, make a mistake and do something right. So that was basically his concept, you know, not so much as making a mistake as much as trying. If you try, then you'll get it. But if you don't, you know, if you tend not to want to make a mistake, then, you know, you won't develop, you won't learn, you know.
And also the top flight musician, of which our guest Charles Davis is one, is the reaction to a mistake as you go on from the mistake to make it fit into the picture.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a recurring theme. You know, you've worked with Monk. Monk, like that concept of you got to make a mistake and then go on. And in fact, that's why he hooked up with Pee Wee Russell. And these are so-called eccentric spirits who yet are hardcore jazz musicians.
Yeah, well, Monk turned me on to playing voicings with 4 notes, which amazed me. You can get an entire sound out of 4 notes. That's hard to believe, but it's an actual truth.
How about the voicing of the reeds, whether there are 3, 4, or more in Sun Ra's band?
I don't know how he arranges, so you can't get me. Can't get me to elaborate on that. I mean, he has a uncanny way of doing what he's doing. You know?
Well, we're going to hear some of that uncanny music. We're going to talk about this after we come back. You know, Sun Ra's occasionally employed the big band concept of 2 tenors, but he's one of the few to employ the concept of 2 baritones. And of course, you were right here with the other one, Pat Patrick, and our guest here, Charles Davis. And there was actually a tune to illustrate that point, or at least that's part of the tune there with 2 ton, isn't it?
2 tones, yes.
2 tones.
Yeah, Patty and I wrote that.
Okay. Yeah. 2 tones and 2 baritones.
Could be 56.
And discussing discographical details. No, you're the guy we want to hear from. Charles Davis, our guest here on the Sun Ra Festival, seems to think that even the earliest datings there are not the correct ones for some of the recordings. You remember recording with Sun Ra as early as 54 or 55 clearly?
Well, at least 55. You know. I couldn't be sure as to the date, but I think it was around 55.
You know, one of the things, and it seems to be nitpicking most of the time in stressing 54 this, 55 that, June 6th, June 7th. But in a review of Sun Ra's music before our academic leaders or the big names and stuff like that. For instance, Grove is now doing American music and is going to follow it with a jazz thing. And the definition of Sun Ra's music is clearly genius, but his pioneering is something that they want to isolate, and they seem to think it's more important if it's 54 because it makes him even more firstist. But you hadn't heard anything like Sun Ra's music before you met up with it, had you?
No, I hadn't. Definitely not.
You have had that unique honor of playing with Monk and with Sun Ra. How would you evaluate, either compare the two or just speak of Sun Ra's keyboard work and his piano playing? What do you think of that, and how do you think it fits in jazz piano playing?
Well, I think each individual, excuse me, is unique within their own right. You know, it's kind of hard to compare. You know, 'cause when you're playing with an individual, things happen with one that's happens. You know, some other special things happen with another. Right now, I'm also playing with Abdul Ibrahim, so he has a specialty. You know, so everyone is special. You know, so it's kind of hard to cross over and compare one, you know, to another one. But in saying that each one is unique within themselves, you get a different feel for the music from each one.
Well, would you say that Sun Ra is off the mainstream of standard jazz piano playing like Monk was? He's different from Monk, or would you say what he plays incorporates more of what you meet up with in your regular rhythm sections you work with all the time?
What standard?
Well, Coach Barry Harris offers a couple of standards.
Yeah, but also, what about Untitled?
Well, you have to retire the award there, don't you?
Yeah, see, I mean, we can go one side and then we can go to the other. Yeah. So that's it's it's just who you like. You know, no one is, as far as the standard is concerned. You know, we say Monk, Sun Ra, and then you say Art Tatum, and then you have various other people. You know,
we're talking with Charles Davis, who of course has played baritone saxophone primarily in reeds with Sun Ra in various settings with the Sun Ra Orchestra since the middle 50s, and continues to play with him in important spots and making great music right here in the 1980s. Tell me something. This is something I discussed with Pat Patrick, not tonight, but on air before. You remember the early years when there was a lot of rehearsal and few gigs. You also remember when, more often than not, you were playing in the kind of casual clothes that we're wearing right now, neither dressed up in to get back to it, the traditional standard there is the suit and tie standard there. I could find one there. Or before the costuming came in. What did you think as that was added to the thing? Did you like it? Did you understand it? What did you make of it? And what did you think of the music when you were playing in street clothes in the middle 50s?
Well, music in the middle 50s was music. You know, that speaks for itself. You know.
Well, what did you think when Sun Ra started saying that we're going to play in these outfits?
Well, see, I wasn't in the band when that transpired. You know, I was at another point in time, and when that transition, came about, I was in the first part of it, and then the transition came, and then I dealt with the transition afterwards.
Well, how about afterwards when you caught up with it? It was still entrenched. It's still a different world on the bandstand it was in 55.
Well, you get your uniform and you go out and hit.
Okay, so it is the standard there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Charles Davis speaking on Sun Ra. Here's a question I did ask Pat Patrick, and I'll reprise here. Was there any particular evening or any number of evenings that you felt the music had a special kind of flow to it, was being better performed, or there was a special spirit on it? And what were the aspects that made it a night to remember? And do you remember any single nights in your career with Sun Ra?
No, I remember a few.
Could you pick out one or two?
Well, mainly the ones I remember is when Patty and I were playing the two baritones. You know, we would play at like Sunday afternoons at a place called Robert's Show Lounge, and then we would play down, on the Sunday afternoon.
Was the two baritone idea Sun Ra's, Pat Patrick's, yours, or a combination of any two or three?
I really don't have any idea how it came about. It was just, I guess, because I played baritone and Pat played baritone, it happened. It wasn't like a pre-planned situation, but it came about, we just started doing it.
And did Sun Ra write anything to, after, besides the fact that you guys cooked up two tones, was there anything written to showcase the two baritone sound?
Yeah, you played something earlier. Ankh, that was one.
Mm-hmm.
And a few more, but I can't remember. I would have to hear them in order to actually remember which ones.
What instrument holds the lead share in the saxophone reed section of Sun Ra? And what's the purpose of what is the lead player doing in Sun Ra's orchestra? You're a member of the reed section.
Well, it's not really a lead, if you want to put lead as the appropriate word. It's just who's being featured or what's going on at the time. But sometimes the baritone can be the lead playing bass notes. Playing bottom notes. It's according to the composition. So it's really the atmosphere at the time. Sometimes it's alto, tenor, trumpet, trombone, whatever. Can be the bass. So that can be the lead as the way you're referring to it.
Did you ever discuss with Monk Sun Ra's music or your experiences with Sun Ra?
No, not really.
How about with Steve Lacy? Did you?
Not to my knowledge. That was like a different period.
Would your fellow musicians ask you about Sun Ra? What would you respond if those conversations happened?
It's according to the question. I don't know.
Well, do you think does he write symphonies like Duke? They might ask. Does he write anything like Harlem Suite?
Well, symphonically, let's see. We were at a recording date, and Overtones of China. You have that. I saw that somewhere. Overtones of China was the introduction to one of the songs we were doing, and we were so amazed and mesmerized at the introduction that turned out to be a song itself. Because after the intro, we didn't play.
And it's chopped right there, and
that was the song itself.
How about if? Well, no, I think that was a great answer. By the way, we're talking with Charles Davis, who's a great musician who played with Sun Ra. A live interview on our festival here on WKCR FM, New York. Well, how about the Saturn business? What do you think of the spaceways and the cosmic kind of interpretation of that explains these flowing evenings of music where everything sort of blends into each other, and there could be dancers, singers, and did he speak of outer space? You were with him when the whole astronaut scene was first starting, when the space age was coming up. Were you aware of this part of the musician Sun Ra?
Yes, definitely. Well, space is still there. So that, that'll be with us for some time.
Okay, well, we got some space for some of that music.
Great.
Maybe we'll blend Saturn with Overtones of China.
Okay.